Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Experience Maker Show. It's actually episode 65. I can't believe I've been doing this for 65 weeks, but man, we keep getting great guests, and as long as we keep getting great guests that have great content, I'm going to keep bringing this show to you. I, of course, am Dan Gingiss, customer experience speaker and coach. Very happy to have you here today, and really excited to have our guest today. We're going across the ocean to Belgium to bring in Steven Van Belleghem. He is an international keynote speaker, author, entrepreneur, and founder of Nexxworks. Steven, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you. You're definitely my first Belgian, so no one can ever take that away from you.
I'm honored.
You got that in the record books. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
All right. Well, the core of my passion is creating and sharing ideas about the future of customer experience, which I do on multiple platforms. I've written 5 books about it in the last 10 years, share a lot of content on YouTube, a lot of content on Instagram, and of course, presenting for organizations around the world. And that's what I do. I've been doing that for the last 20 years, first in the world of marketing research, where I was a partner in a research company. Then a couple of years on my own, just being a speaker. And then I created Nexxworks, which is an inspiration company where we try to inspire executives from all over the world to become more customer-centric and to prepare for what we call the day after tomorrow. So that's how I spend my days.
That's awesome. So 20 years, I mean, I'm not even sure that 20 years ago, customer experience was even in the lexicon. Can you point to sort of where customer experience started becoming a focus?
Well, in my early days, my job was to look at how technology was changing customer behavior. And we're talking about the early 2000s, right? And that was about internet. And the focus back then was how decision-making was different because of the internet and how sales funnels were filled in a different way than before. And then a couple of years later, we had the arrival of social media. We used Web 2.0 back then as a hype terminology. But then we had Facebook and Twitter popping up. And I think that was the turning point, because at that moment, many executives were confronted with the feedback of their customers. They actually saw that customers can have a voice and that voice can have impact. The whole idea of word of mouth became very tangible. And because of multiple PR issues that multiple companies had, I think at that point, they started to focus more on a better customer service and in the end, at a better customer experience.
I love that you said that, because I point back to the same moment, and I came in from a marketer as well. I had been a marketer in pretty much every other channel other than television over my career, and I got into social media, and the first thing that I realized was this is the first marketing channel where people can talk back to you. And exactly. That was fascinating. That was to me, it was mind-blowing, because any other marketing that I had done in my career, it was one directional. I never got feedback on it. And all of a sudden now you've got, as you said, the customer has a voice, and man, they decided to use that voice to tell us what they wanted. And I think they wanted a better experience. So exactly. Glad that I didn't just make that up, and that you saw that same thing. So, all right. So that's a number of years ago. Fast forward, we're coming out of a pandemic. Certainly, my view is that the pandemic, if anything, shined even a brighter light on customer experience and made it even more important than it was before. What are you seeing today in terms of the companies that are being successful?
I think if you want to be successful today, and if you want to win the heart and the business of your customers, there are 4 different layers how you can create value. The bottom layer is very simple. That's about having a good product, competitive price, and good customer service. But that's the minimum demand. That's not how you're going to win. And I think because of the pandemic, what we've seen is the big digital jump forward. It's like we stepped into a digital time machine and we got catapulted 7 years into the future. And because of that, digital convenience is also part of the new minimum. In the past 10 years, you could differentiate yourselves, and many of the examples that we're both using are examples of companies that in the past 10 years really understood how convenience could make a difference. Well, today, that's the minimum demand. That's a commodity. So the question is, how can you positively differentiate yourself in such a world? And I play with two dimensions there. First one is what I call partner in life. Organizations that can create a positive change in the life of customers, yeah, they can have a huge positive impact. And the moment that you understand that you need to look at the human behind the customer, and where you understand that every human has like a movie of her or his life in the back of their mind with their dreams, their fears, their hopes, their worries. And if you understand those and you can have positive impact on that, then you're having an impact on people's life journey. And I think successful customer experience organizations today don't just focus on the customer journey, they also focus on that life journey. That's one dimension how I see many companies making a difference today. And then next to that, on top of that, I think it's more and more important to look at society, to take your responsibility, and to figure out a way how you can connect it to the strengths and the core of your organization, use your strengths to actually have a positive impact on society. And I'm not just talking about sustainability, I'm also talking about social value, because I don't think it's about changing the world. I think it's about changing your world. Where you use your strengths to have an impact on your community, on your market, your employees. And if you do that in a way that it links back to your core business, then it actually has an impact also on your customer experience. And that's the philosophy that I'm playing with now. If you have a great product, service, price, if you have digital convenience, if you become a partner in life and you can change your world, if you combine those four in one storyline, one experience, then you can create what I call an offer people can't refuse. And there are multiple organizations that are now playing this game in different industries, large and small organizations. So that's what I strongly believe in. And I think most of those trends aren't new, but I follow your conclusion, Dan, that there was just an acceleration of many of these underlying trends because of the pandemic. And because of that, they have a higher impact today than 2 years ago.
Yeah, I really love that, and I want to unpack a couple of those things because you got my mind racing here. I think on the following the person's journey, the life journey, to me, one of the keys there is that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but my interpretation is that this isn't about creating personas like marketers do, because a persona puts an individual into a group of hundreds or thousands of other people that are supposed to be like them. But just because I'm a 47-year-old white male that lives in Chicago doesn't mean I'm like every other 40-something-year-old white male in Chicago, right? We like different things. We have different life experiences, different desires and goals, et cetera. And so to be grouped in a persona, to me, is a little bit lazy. And I think one of the things that customer experience people are figuring out that maybe marketers are a little bit farther behind is that this one-to-one, as you say, trying to affect the life journey of an individual is so key. I also like what you said about the world, that it's not so much changing the world, but it's having a positive impact. And if all companies had a positive impact, then we really would see change. And so you kind of, it's sort of like, I equate it to recycling, right? I can only recycle my own paper and cans and plastic, right? I can't do it for my neighbor. I can't do it for the guy down the street. So I can only be responsible for my own little footprint on the world and hope that everybody else is responsible too. And I think that it's the same with companies, is that we can have an effect in our own world. That doesn't necessarily mean not all of us are Bill Gates and can throw billions of dollars at sustainability initiatives, but we can focus on the parts that we can control. So I really like that. I want to go back to the first thing you said, though, which was convenience, because I agree with you that is sort of table stakes, but I would argue that so many companies still don't get it, and that's one of the table stakes that's missing in a lot of places. Are you still seeing that?
Absolutely. And a lot of people react to the fact that I say digital convenience is a commodity, because people every day you bump into organizations that don't have their game up. It's still very inconvenient. But then the customer just chooses a different solution. I think that we are now in a world where there's some sort of a zero tolerance for digital inconvenience. And if you don't have it in play, you're going to lose customers instantly. I always ask an audience when I give a presentation, just think back to the last time you installed a new app on your phone. How many chances do you give that new app? And we both know the answer. The answer is 1.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, how long does that one chance last? And most of the time we express that in seconds rather than in minutes. And we're both no teenagers here. This is something that a teenager does, a 40-year-old does, but also my 72-year-old father just functions in the same way. So we are not ready to invest any of our time to figure out how something works anymore. So if you don't have it in play, you're going to lose customers as from today. And I fully agree with you. There's still so many companies that don't see that. It's like they don't see the frictions. It's like they're not going through their own processes. I think that's often the problem. It's if a CEO of a big bank, if she or he needs a new credit card, I always wonder, do they follow the same process as we do as customers, or do they call an assistant and say, I need a new credit card? Probably they don't even know what it looks like very often.
Yeah, I know the answer to that because I worked for a credit card company for 10 plus years. And one of the things that when I first started, I was offered an employee card. And I said no, because I didn't want anyone to know inside that I was an employee. But I learned later that there was a VIP flag on certain accounts. So when the CEO called customer service, it got routed immediately to the top supervisor, right? So he never got to see what it was really like. And I made sure that my account didn't have that because I wanted to be treated like any other customer. But I had just an experience recently that I think, and I love sort of putting this into real life stories, but I had an experience just recently that I think totally epitomizes what you're saying. I applied for a business credit card. And I hadn't had one yet for my business, so I applied for one. But I forgot, in the United States, we have 3 credit bureaus, and you have the ability to freeze your credit account, which basically means nobody can access it. It's a safety measure, right? Well, I forgot to unfreeze my credit account. So I go to apply for the credit card, and they decline me because they can't look up my credit profile. But they don't tell me why they declined me. And in fact, they said that they were going to send me a letter that I should receive in 7 to 10 business days with an explanation. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right? I mean, of course, what I did is I went to a different bank, I unfroze my credit, and I got a card from somewhere else. There's no tolerance for this. And especially given that that same experience asked me up front, do you want to apply online or do you want to apply in a branch? So I've already identified myself as an online customer, and then you're going to tell me that I have to wait 7 to 10 days in the mail to get a result. It's not, that doesn't line up, right? And so if I'm applying online, I expect something instant. We have Lisa Sedlak is listening, and Lisa has a comment. Part of the lack of convenience is not being where the customer is. For example, using Facebook as the only way to communicate. Yeah, I definitely agree. One of the things that I mentioned in my new book, Lisa, is you would never tell somebody on the telephone to please tweet us instead. And yet on Twitter, we have no problem telling people to please call us instead. And there is no reason why we should be doing that. We should be meeting customers where they are. Thank you, Lisa. I also have a question from Milland Campbell. Steve mentioned digital convenience is a commodity. I don't know what WRT means. In this pandemic lockdown area, do you think voice support as a channel will be impacted the most for customers? How are companies tackling it?
Well, voice support through contact centers is probably what you mean. What I've heard from most of my clients is that because of the pandemic, they had a huge increase in customers calling them, in customers emailing them, especially during the first lockdown. I mean, people were so worried, people were in a state of panic, they didn't know what to do. So it was almost impossible for organizations to keep up with all the questions. And some were able to reorganize. As some said, okay, we have so many people that are now unemployed, we're just gonna put them in the contact center, we're gonna double the capacity because this is the moment that we're gonna prove that we're here for them in times of crises. Others just said, well, it's too much, we're not gonna do it. And we both know who won the game. Now, what I see is that the number of questions to contact centers, they have decreased again, but they're still higher than before the pandemic. So what means that more and more customers, just if they have a question, they don't wait anymore. They just shoot it out on social media, they call, they send an email, and they expect an instant reply. So for businesses in the long run, they will have to figure out a way how to deal with this, with combining the strengths of digital interfaces and the strengths of human interfaces. Like maybe the most successful contact center in the world is from a company called Ctrip. It's a Chinese company. It's like the booking.com from China. They reply to every question that they get within 20 seconds. That's the deadline. And about 85% of all replies are done through chatbots and automated services, the easy to reply questions. But they also make sure that they have more than enough people that are there to talk to humans, to take care of the 15% other questions. And they make sure that they have enough people there to reply through voice also within 15 seconds. And this is an extreme example, but I think every organization will have to look for ways how to automate part of the questions. And on the other hand, don't forget about the human touch as well, because as a customer, you know, probably in 95% of the cases, you just want to have digital only, like when you have an issue with your insurance and you have a minor accident with your car. I mean,
Uh-oh, we're getting a little bit of stalling here.
Definitely.
Lost you there just for a second, Steven. All right, good. I think, you know, one of the follow-up questions I wanted to ask you is, why are companies so afraid to talk to customers? Why is customer service still looked at as a call center, as a cost center, when there is such an opportunity to grow the relationship with the customer by having that human connection?
It's incredible. I think one of the issues is that organizations tend to dehumanize customers. Most of senior leadership teams, they get information about the customer in a very abstract, a very statistical kind of way. 75% of our customers are happy with what we do. Oh, great job, 75%. I think they miss the lack of the real human stories. And my recommendation to companies is always make sure that as many people as possible in the organization get direct feedback directly from individual humans. Just imagine what would happen if the bank that declined you for that business credit card. Just imagine if every employee that they have would spend just 10 minutes a week to call with an individual customer, just to listen to their stories, just that. Thousands of people that call 10 minutes a week with a customer. I'm so convinced that that would change everything, and that would change the culture, the way they make decisions, and at the end of the day, they would become more customer-centric than ever before. But there's not enough direct feedback. They're not getting the oohs and the ahs directly from the customer, and I think that's a major problem.
You're so right. I always say that, you know, the voice of the customer is not a report. It's an actual voice. And to hear your customer's voice changes everything. To hear their frustration, to hear their disappointment, to hear their anger when something's going wrong. And, you know, when I worked in the credit card industry, we listened to live calls once a month. And I always thought this was such an important part of ensuring a great customer experience, because the first thing we did was take a look at how did the agent respond, and did we have any feedback that we could have given to the agent? But the bigger part and the more important part was we looked at what caused this call in the first place. What broke that caused this customer to have to call their credit card company, right? Nobody wants to call their credit card company, but unless they have to. And so when you take a look at, well, what caused that, you start to figure out, well, if we fix that, we can stop other people from having to call, and therein lower the cost that everybody's so worried about. But I always thought that hearing that voice and hearing the frustration or whatever the emotions were, it made me at least want to go back to my desk and go fix stuff, because it really hits you in a way that a report can't. And I think a lot of people misinterpret that voice of the customer is just supposed to be an NPS score, but that doesn't tell you. All it tells you is how you're doing. It doesn't tell you why. And I think that's the really important part.
Totally agree.
Speaking of which, a former colleague of mine, Eddie, great to see you, Eddie Carlos. The third element is intelligence of data. Know when I can solve my problem via bot versus human. Furthermore, recognize my prior interactions to help quickly solve my need. Yeah, I totally agree. This idea of automation is awesome until you need to talk to a human. And then when the bot doesn't want you to do that or offers you 17 other choices besides from that, you've basically just digitized the IVR on the phone, which we all learned to dislike on the phone, and it's just been moved to digital. What are you seeing, Steven, in terms of the best practices for using chatbots?
Well, I love the feedback that we got from Eduardo. I'm a big believer that artificial intelligence will first play a vital role behind the scenes and not in front of the scenes. It's like, how can you create intelligence augmented for your teams, especially in contact centers? You see it already today that you have these software platforms that dive into your data from the past. And when a question comes in from a customer, they dive into that historical data and they suggest an answer for that specific question, but they don't send it straight away. There's a human agent that can still see that answer and can decide to personalize it, to play with it, to adapt some minor things, and then ship it to the customer. This is intelligence augmented. You're facilitating that human to do a better job, and that human can spend her or his time to personalize it, put some branding elements into it, and they have a faster reply to the customer in a more personalized way. I think that's where artificial intelligence will play the biggest role in the next couple of years to improve customer service.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's the AI versus IA. I love it. And I totally agree with you that the best use of this is helping agents become better agents. And what do they do that a computer can't do? They have a human relationship. And so I always imagine, IBM's Watson, the one that went on Jeopardy and beat all the humans, right? Because it knew the answer to every question. I always imagine, in my mind, an agent sitting there and Watson sitting right next to them, right? And so the agent now knows the answer to any question that could ever possibly be asked. Plus, they have all of the customer data that could ever possibly be needed, synthesized in a simple way by a computer. And now, instead of the agent having to have 3 screens and bouncing between different apps and cutting and pasting responses and all this sort of stuff, they can just be human. They can just talk to the customer, which is exactly what the customer, I think, really wants, is that human interaction. And if we sort of tie this discussion back to the pandemic, I think that's what really got exacerbated, is this desire for human connection, because we couldn't have it for so long. Mm-hmm. And so the last thing we wanted was to interact with a robot. We wanted to just talk to somebody. And so I couldn't agree with you more that the best use case is helping agents be better at what they can distinctively do, which is be human.
Yeah, and it's probably not just customer service agents. It's also people in the field, in retail and hospitality. Like when you go to a hotel, the number one question I don't like to get is this your first time here, sir? Right. They should know that. And it's especially annoying when you already went 20 times in that same hotel, and then there's a very friendly person waiting for you saying, is this your first time here? And you cannot blame that employee. There's so many people coming in, but companies like that, hotels, restaurants, they should have a very simple data set that knows this is Steven's 20th time here. So we're going to celebrate this moment, and we're going to say, good to have you back. We're so happy with you.
Exactly.
Small things can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, the opposite of that experience, I worked for a company based in Louisville, Kentucky, and so I was down there twice a month, and I stayed at the same hotel every time. And we got to a point where literally I'd walk in the door, and I was halfway to the counter, and they would already be saying, "Welcome back, Mr. Gingiss."
That's great.
Now that makes me want to rebook at this hotel every single time, right? And then another example, I had a podcast partner way back when who worked for Hyatt, and he told me that what they tried to do is if somebody tweeted at them that they needed a hypoallergenic pillow for their hotel room in Los Angeles, that the next time that same customer booked a hotel in London, that same hypoallergenic pillow would already be there, because they shouldn't have to ask a second time. And I think those are the types of examples, this anticipatory service or the anticipatory experience is really what, to me, is that next level that only a few companies have started to figure out. But when you do as a customer, it's an amazing experience.
It is.
All right, we're coming up on time. I told you this was going to be a super fast half an hour. You mentioned at the beginning that you like to study the future of customer experience. So we've talked about the past, we've talked about the present. Give me a couple of prognostications for what's coming next in customer experience.
Well, what really fascinates me is the role of technology in customer experience. And we talked about AI behind the scenes, but in the next couple of years, we're also gonna have AI that will influence the customer journey. I can imagine when tools like Alexa and Siri and Google Assistant work really well, like the iPhone after the BlackBerry moment for these virtual assistants, that we're going to outsource more and more to those devices. And because of that, we're going to have customer journeys where the customer is no longer part of the journey. And I think that's an interesting one to think about. That's one aspect. The second dimension is that the role of humans will become more important than ever. You already mentioned it. It's the old law of scarcity. When something becomes scarce, it increases in value. The human touch has never been more scarce than today, so it's going to increase in importance. But the trick here will be to make sure as a human that you excel in those fields where computers are not good at. Empathy, enthusiasm, just positive intent, the positive energy sharing. And I believe companies that are capable to really grab the opportunities of the digital evolutions, but also understand the human transformation as a consequence of that, and if they can combine those two elements, that they're going to be hugely successful.
Awesome. I love it. Steven Van Belleghem from Belgium. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for dropping so much knowledge on our audience today. Pleasure to talk with you, and let's do it again soon.
Thank you for having me, Dan. It was a pleasure to be in your show. I'm very thankful.
All right, and thank you to the audience for being here. Thanks for the great questions and comments. Always love the engagement from the audience. I think it makes for a better show, so really appreciate it. Next week, I just want to give you a heads up. We're going to be at a slightly different day and time. We're going to be on Wednesday instead of Thursday. We're going to be an hour earlier. So it's Wednesday, June 9th, 2021 at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's 8 a.m. Pacific. And I guess it would be 5 p.m. Central European time if I did my math right there, Steven. We're going to have Diane Devitt, and Diane is an event producer and consultant. We're going to talk about event experiences as things start to open up and conferences come back. And Steven and I can't wait for that because we can't wait to get back on stage. Diane's going to tell us what to expect. I also want to just give you a heads up about my new book coming out September 14th. It's The Experience Maker, How to Create Remarkable Experiences That Your Customers Can't Wait to Share. Some great stories in there, tons and tons of case studies. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever you shop for books. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. I'm Dan Gingiss, customer experience speaker and coach. I'll see you next week on Wednesday, not Thursday, on the Experience Maker Show. Have a great rest of the week and a terrific weekend.